Welcome to another video, guys, brought to you by your one and only literary pharaoh. I'm on the road to work this morning, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight in how to allow your child to have resilience as they grow, as they mature. Parents, stop trying to coddle your kids and overprotect them from things of this world. You can teach your kids, but stop trying to surround them with this proverbial bubble that's going to keep them protected all the time. Sometimes overprotection comes as a detriment to the psychological and social development of your child. I'll give you an example. Do you know that most kids who grow up in rough schools and are put in situations where they're constantly having to overcome adversity, do you know that those kids end up having a stronger, resilient mind as they grow to be adults because they've seen chaos, they've normalized trauma in their lives? And I know it sounds negative when you hear the term normalized trauma, but that's what the brain does. The brain goes into self-preservation. It has to sustain you. So in order for your brain to function normally, all right, the neurotransmitters of the brain mingled in with the responses by the parasympathetic nerve responses of the brain, it just puts you in a mode of rest where chaotic situations don't put you in flight or fight. Your amygdala isn't impacted anymore because you've seen this over and over again. You take Lindsay, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Lindsay, who goes to private school. She's been going to private school all her life. And she's never seen fights at school, no trauma at school, no fights, no kids aren't cursing out teachers. Everyone does what they're supposed to do. 100% parent involvement. Sort of like a utopic state. Sort of like a state of utopia. Okay? Then, on the contrasting end, on the stark opposite end, you have Shaquisha. Shaquisha is in a hood school. Shaquisha has been going to bad schools all her life. Shaquisha has been going to Title I schools all her life, and she sees fights. She's in high school now. She has classmates that are pregnant, rampant drug use, all sorts of things that she's exposed to. Okay? Now, let's swap. Let me take Shaquisha, let me put her in the private school. And let me take Lindsay, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Lindsay. Let me take Lindsay and put her in the Title I schools. Do you know what would happen? Lindsay would lose her mind. Lindsay would have a mental breakdown. Lindsay would most likely not want to go to school anymore. Lindsay would need help. She would need to start to speak to a professional counselor because she's exposed to something that she's not used to. Whereas Shaquisha, you put her in the private school environment, she's just like, oh, this is different, but she can adjust. Now, you may be asking the question, what's my point? What the point is, when you have kids that are growing up in chaotic situations that are less than pristine and far likely to be ideal, which is most of the public schools in America, most of them are basically, glorified prisons, if you ask me. And there's no such thing as education in schools. There's really miseducation to build people to feed into the military-industrial complex. That's all that is. So the reason why I'm making that point is when you have a person that's growing up in chaotic situations and they're dealing with so much, and the situation and the environment and the culture of a place that they go to get their education isn't the best. Okay, let me just say that it's not the best. Far from the best, far from standard, way below average, way below the ideal of what school's supposed to be, because parents send their kids to school to learn, and everything that's happening in school is happening, and most of the things, 85 to 90% of the things, are not about education. They're everything else but education. You take a child that's going through that most of their lives, they've already built a sort of shell, and they are calloused in a way. They are desensitized to the normal traumatic events that bombard the normal brain. The neuroplasticity of the brain has learned to adjust to what they are encountering. And it's sort of like a person who's been seeing murder all their lives. Like, it becomes normal. They grew up in it. That's part of their truth. And you have a person who's never seen anybody murdered in front of them. The first time they see that, they are impacted. The person who goes through the harder life has more resilience than the person who's been overprotected. Parents, stop trying to overprotect your children. Don't give them everything that they want. Let them struggle. Struggle builds something, is something virtuous about struggle. Because the struggle is never in vain. It has an end result. There's an inevitable result that comes from struggle. Even if you don't want the result to come, it will come by default, because it builds character, it builds something in you. You can't deny the impact of struggle. You can't deny the impact of being surrounded by chaos. We've glorified the term trauma so much that we've weaponized trauma so much to the point that we don't understand that how that word trauma has been used to weaken the human drive and weaken the human ambition. It causes us to be highly docile against things that we should not be passive about. Why are we trying to protect ourselves? How can we become hardened? Why are athletes, people who work out, why are they so good at what they do? Is because they put their body through uncomfortable situations to get a result. But the uncomfortable situation that they put their bodies through could be deemed as stressful, which it is, because when you're pumping iron and lifting weights and doing resistance training and you're running, you're causing all sorts of resistance to the body. You're causing stress, but it's good stress. And that good stress breaks down muscles to allow your muscles to actually grow. Because in order for something to grow, it has to be broken down. In order for it to be mended back together, for it to come back together and be fixed, it has to be broken. Then it tightens up and gets stronger. You break it again, it gets stronger. You break down the muscle again, it gets stronger. All right? That's what happens in the brain. But society doesn't tell us that. Society tells us to protect your children from this, protect your children from that. And yes, I agree, there's a balance. You have to protect your kids from certain things. I get it. But don't think that you are a failure of a parent because you can't put your kid in the best schools, or because your kids don't have the best clothes, or because your kids aren't growing up in the best environment. Most great people came from the mud because there was something built within them that was being forged by the unlikely environments. Because you cannot build a diamond in cold. You know, they say pressure and fire is what is used to create that diamond. You need pressure and adversity to create something that's worthwhile, that's sustainable. And that thing that's worthwhile and sustainable can sustain any onslaught because it's been hardened. When people work out, you know why you get calloused? Because your skin starts to get harder and hardened because of the metal that's rubbing against it. So the skin, to protect itself, it builds hardness to allow you to grip the metal. So now we have hard metal with hard calloused hands. It's a match made in heaven. Now working out and lifting the iron doesn't hurt that much because your skin has built the callus that it needs to grip the metal, or to grip the iron. Same thing in life. The body builds a stronger mechanism in order to combat the things that it's going against. That's how resilience is birthed. The seed of resilience is birthed in chaos. The seed of resilience is birthed in trauma. Trauma isn't so much of a bad thing when we have the normal response to trauma in phases. Listen to what I'm trying to tell you guys. When trauma first hits you, and then the word trauma is glorified, and you have all these people coming from different, places. You have a person that's trying to give you medicine for the trauma that you dealt with as a child. You have a person that's coming over here to talk to you about your trauma. Trauma. We've caused ourselves to be perpetual victims of something that was actually put here by the universe to actually make us stronger. Now, there are certain traumatic events that I agree are horrible, like a little child getting violated, the R word, RAPE. If something happens to a little child or a woman or anything like that, those are traumatic experiences. I'm not talking about those type of traumatic experiences. You have varying levels of trauma. The high degree trauma I'm not talking about. I'm talking about how society has taken every little thing that somebody goes through and they call it trauma. People say, oh, parents of the home have broken up. That's traumatic to a child. Is it? Well, it is, but that breakup can actually build resilience in that child. But it depends on how you respond to it. See, once your kid is inserted in trauma and you remove the kid out of that trauma as a way to protect them, you're doing that child a disservice. Keep that child in the trauma, because the brain will build its own resilience, its own mechanism of resilience. So let's say a child has been moving from home to home to home, to foster home to home. A lot of people would deem that as traumatic. Oh my God, he's never had a family. Oh my God, he's never had a home. Oh my God, the parents gave up on him when he was little. He's been living in foster homes. Those type of children are built different. You say, what do you mean they're built different? They're built different in a good way. They already have resilience. They're not dependent upon family. They're dependent upon self. And they know how to navigate the social constructs to get what they want. They know how to navigate the social paradigms, and the social engineering becomes something that they're good at naturally, because they've learned to adapt and adjust to different kind of people. They can go into a job and talk this way. They can go here. They can go there. You can put them anywhere. They can survive. Whereas the person who stayed with one family, who grew up with that one family, nuclear family structure, and which is nothing wrong with growing up with one family. That's great. But I'm letting you know, parents, and letting you know, anyone who's listening to this video, don't take your disadvantages as something that, don't take it as something that's the end all be all, as if because I don't have what the standard is, that means I'm a failure. No, you're being built for something. Your situation is the nesting ground, is the soil that's going to help you have strong roots and grow to be strong. But you need to be in the dirt first. Everything that's nourishment to the body comes from the dirt. You have to embrace the dirt, folks. You have to embrace the traumatic events in life. The mid-level traumatic events. I'm not talking about traumatic events of like, being violated. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'm not minimalizing trauma at all. What I'm saying is that society has taken things that should be viewed as normal. They're starting to categorize those events as trauma. And I think that's an issue. Because when you glorify events, or when you put events underneath the identification of trauma, what you're essentially doing, you're weaponizing the normal actions of the universe that are put here to actually strengthen us. You're using that as a means of putting the human experience against that normal occurrence as something that's negative, thus putting us in a disadvantageous state by calling it trauma, saying, oh, you've been under trauma. The word is so overly used that we don't even understand what true trauma is. Living in this world, our objective is not to escape hardship. As a matter of fact, I would argue and say our objective is to embrace the hardships, because it's out of those hardships that nourishment and success is birthed, and resilience is birthed, and flexibility is birthed, receptivity is birthed, reciprocity is birthed, empathy is birthed. Empathy is birthed from people who felt pain, because people who feel pain can feel other people's pain because they've been there before. People who've been overly coddled. Mommy gave me everything that I wanted. My name's Lindsay. I went to the best schools. That's not real life. Real life, we're not surrounded by the best of everything. We have pockets of things that are better than others, but it's a collage. It's a mixture of different things. It's an amalgamation of so many different things. So you can't really just say, I'm going to put my kid in this atmosphere, in this environment, and think that that's going to help your child. Now, it may help you. I think it does better for the parent. You feel good that you're protecting your child, but are you really protecting them? See, my job as a parent is to prepare my kids, to prepare them. I told my kids, I said, if it wasn't for mom, you guys wouldn't get anything from me. You guys would just have food and clothes. I don't want to get you all the toys. And my wife is starting to see that. See, I don't force my ideas on people. I just live out my ideas and people feel me. And when people feel me, they're influenced not by what I say, but what I do. My wife, it takes time for her to see things. When she first met me, her diet was different. I didn't force her. I just kept eating and doing the things I did. And eventually she started to kind of change her diet a little bit. Now, does she eat exactly like me? No, she doesn't. But she's improved a lot. She's improved drastically. Even the way we were raising our children, you know, she comes from the belief that she has this Hollywood, and many women do. They have, that's why having a man in the house sort of neutralizes that. A lot of women have this, oh, I want my kids to have this. I want them to look a certain way, dress a certain way. I want them to have this. I'm from Nigeria, and we were poor. We lived in villages. Like, I didn't have shit. Rats were my friend. When I slept, I had rats nibbling on my feet. Like, we lived bad, dude. Like, we didn't have anything. We had each other, but I grew up fine. Like, it gave me an incentive to work hard to want more for myself because I wasn't given anything. But it's not even about acquiring material trinkets. It's much bigger than that. There's a seed that's being planted in the soil of hardships. And that's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. Like, my parents didn't know what they were doing. They probably thought they were failures. They probably thought, oh my God, I want to do more for my kids. You're not a failure. You are in your current state, mom and dad, if you're listening to this, anybody, even if you're a young person listening to this, you are in your current state because that's where you're supposed to be. Something's being built. And this has nothing to, I'm not going against people who have quote unquote nice lives, who go to the best schools. Mom and dad are filthy rich. You're the kind of kid that's driving a BMW or a Benz to school in high school, and other kids have to walk. We're not talking. I'm not talking down on those kids. That's fine. If your parents can provide for you those things, that's great. Your time to shine is now. But everything has its evolution, meaning that everything goes through its cycles. Meaning that you struggle now, you prosper later. You prosper now, you struggle later. Let's say it again. You struggle now. It depends on how you perceive your struggle. You struggle now. Those hardships are built, those resilient mechanisms within the brain, within you, how you perceive reality becomes strengthened because of the stresses you have, the struggles, which allows you to have a better future. Now, when I say better future, I don't want you guys to misconstrue what I'm saying. When I say better future, it doesn't necessarily mean that it equates to you having more money or having more material trinkets. That's where you guys miss the whole message. A better future means the way you perceive reality. The better future lies within the temple. How you perceive reality, your mental state. If your mental state is good, everything else starts to operate good. We have the ability, all right, to create what kind of reality we want. But it can't be simply about money all the time. Because if it is, you become a slave, you become dependent upon that. But if your mind is okay, if your thinking is at equilibrium and it's balanced, and you know how to persevere through all things, then all things become subservient to you because nothing could overcome you. You become a natural overcomer of everything that's around you. So therefore you have inner peace that money can't buy. That's success to me. Success is not the kid who grows up rich. Parents, have given them everything, trust fund kind of babies, and they go to college, they're coked up, but they have money though. They have the nice car, they party all the time, but they're empty. They're empty vessels. They're filled with so much material trinkets, but none of those material things are worth anything because they can all be destroyed. They can all be taken. Their mental capacity and their mental state is weakened. They fluctuate up and down. They're the ones that go get pills for anxiety, and you're wondering like, why the fuck are you anxious? You grew up in a double parent home, mom and dad were always there for you, like, why the hell do you have anxiety, and why is it that me, who grew up struggling, why am I at peace? You see what happens there? Eventually the rubber meets the road. Everybody's going to have their day underneath the sun. You can either struggle earlier and embrace the struggle, which is going to help you have a better mental state. That's success, folks. Why do you think I end my videos by saying all the time your health is your wealth? Not your wealth is your health. Your health is your wealth. It's not about money, because there are certain things that money can't fix. Money can't fix your brain. If your brain is gone, if your perceptions, because people's perceptions is their reality, if your perception is your reality, then it's very important that you have a very even-keeled perception about the things that you're encountering on a daily basis. It's very important to your psyche. It's very important to your aura, to the kind of vibrational output that you emit. All of those things are important. All of it. Neither one is insignificant. So it's rather important to understand that when you're living life, it's not about escaping hardships. It's just about being where you are in the moment and let the hardships do what it was made to do. And those hardships will be the compelling agent, all right, infusing within your DNA a compulsion to excel to greatness amidst the chaos around you. Why do you think people who can thrive in chaos, people look up to people like that? Like, oh my God, how are you able to do all this with all this happening? What do you mean how I was able to do this? This is my normal. But if you take Lindsay, blue-eyed, blue-haired Lindsay, who had everything given to her, how do you think she's gonna react when the first time she faces true adversity? She's either gonna be suicidal, she's probably gonna get on drugs to cope. That's the kind of society we're building. We're building weak-minded people by trying to evade what we deem to be traumatic, which is, it really isn't traumatic. Every hardship in life, it shouldn't be categorized as trauma. Being in traffic right now as I'm driving to work, some people will consider this traumatic. Oh, it's trauma. I'm trying to get to work, it's trauma. A kid grows up with mom and dad divorce. Trauma. That's not trauma, that's normal. That's not trauma. And I'm not saying it's not trauma because it's normal. I'm not saying that's not traumatic. That's just a change. That's a change in routine, and which will force your brain to adjust. The adjustment part is the part that's not comfortable. But again, we should embrace being uncomfortable in order for us to be comfortable. Our brains are malleable, folks. Stop trying to put it on one mode, on easy mode. It's like you get a video game. You have easy mode, you have normal, you have hard. Stop trying to play the game on easy mode, because you get no satisfaction in playing the game on easy mode. When you play the game on easy mode and you win, there's still an emptiness that resides within you. You're like, I beat the game, but man, that was too easy. See, as human beings, we are wired for challenges. We were built that way. We were initially built to be slaves. Did you know that? We were built to be slaves by the Anunnaki gods. We were built to be slaves. But the divine spark was put within us to thwart that, giving us a sense of drive to have purpose. And therein lies the paradox, because one, we have the animal gene that's in us to just function as slaves, and our purpose wrapped around functionality and deeming extraterrestrial beings as our gods. And the other juxtaposition is that we are divine beings with a high sense of spiritual capacity, of spiritual attainment and spiritual enlightenment, but yet we can't get there because there's a blocker. There's a genetic blocker that's put on our telomere capsules that stops us from actually living long enough to actually acquire that true spirituality. So by the time we start to get there, we'll die. In our minds, we start to become senile. The foods are polluted, the air is polluted, all those things are keeping us stagnant. So we can never reach our potential. As we are evolving to reach our potential, we can't get there. The human experience. Allow the negative to help build the positive. Shaquisha who went to the bad schools, the hood girl, she grows up to be an entrepreneur. But do you know, before she became an entrepreneur, do you know how many failed businesses she had? But she was resilient. She kept pushing. You say, but how? Because she grew up always pushing. She grew up seeing chaos. She grew up underneath the pressure of failure. She has no other choice but to have success. She doesn't even know how to internalize failure because she's seen it so much that it becomes the norm. Failure is the norm. So getting out of failure becomes a push. No different than the involuntary act of breathing, right? Breathing is involuntary. You don't tell yourself to breathe and stop breathing. You just breathe because that's a natural bodily function. Her natural function is failure. So she has to fight against failure to make failure have meaning. Your breath has meaning because if I stop you from breathing, you're going to start fighting to breathe. But why are you fighting to breathe? Because the juxtaposition to not breathing is forcing you to breathe. There's a opposing force that's forcing you to breathe. So therefore, life in breathing becomes valuable because the juxtaposition of not breathing causes you to have value in breathing. The position of failure causes you to have value in success. But success cannot be measured in a person who's dealt with failure most of their life. Success is not measured by the same metric that everybody else measures success. Everybody else measures success by money and what's in your bank account. People who struggle measure success by just having a peace of mind. Those people have a sense of a high degree of tranquility. They're very retrospective. They're very gracious. They're very grateful. They're very appreciative. And they mind their own damn business. That's the makeup of a person that's dealt with alleged trauma all their lives. Then you have those who buy into the system because they're listening to what everybody else is telling them. Everybody comes around them, they give them the excuses, or the reason why you're failing is because of the trauma in your life. Let's help you get rid of the trauma and deal with your trauma. Let's talk it out. No, the body and the brain, that we have our bodies and our minds has a way of internalizing the trauma to bring the best out of us. Because every individual is different. You don't try to get the trauma out, talk it out, deal with it. There's nothing to deal with. Let it become you. Become one with your trauma. It's like the movie Venom. At first, there was a conflict between, Eddie Brock and the Venom. It was a symbiote. They had to learn to work together, and they eventually got it right. But there's two sides to this. There's the Venom suit that takes over Eddie Brock, and there's Eddie Brock. So there's a constant battle, but they need each other. All right, the convergence of two of them makes them what they are, makes them great. By themselves, they're weak. Together, they're strong. Your trauma is needed to make you strong. And I say trauma loosely. I'm just using it the way the world uses it because everybody likes to call everything trauma. Oh, you grew up without a mom. Your dad was mean to you. He abused you verbally and physically. Your parents divorced at a young age. You lived in foster homes all your life. You never had a mother to love you. You never had a father to love you. So what? So? What does that mean? Does that mean that your life is over? No. Use that to build your resilience and let that be the engine to move you into greatness. Greatness of mind, greatness of thought, a greatness of being the person that you want to be. The body has a way of dealing with it, just like the body has a way of dealing with disease. When the body is inundated with a lot of toxins, what does the body start to do? The body starts to eliminate those toxins by itself. We call it sickness in America, but that's the body that shows signs of being healthy. The body has a response to stress, and that response to stress increases mucus function, and the mucus drives out the toxic debris inside the body. to put the body back in homeostasis. But the medical industry comes in to save the day and tells you to take these medicines. And what the medicines do, believe it or not, what the medicines do, they stop the process of cleansing, momentarily giving you the false notion that you are being healed, when in actuality the medicines that you're taking are slowing down your healing process, thus putting you in a state of being sick prolonged. I know it's hard. Your head is banging, your body's aching, you want to take something for it. You got to ride it out. You got to sit it out. I know it's hard. It's much easier to go to a pill, but let the body do what it needs to do. Get a bunch of sunlight, drink a bunch of fluids. If you don't feel like eating, don't force yourself to eat, because the body needs to shut down your eating mechanisms so it doesn't use the energy that it's supposed to be using to eliminate the toxic debris. So the energy isn't being used on chemical digestion. So the body has a way of dealing with things. Why do I give that example? I'm giving that example to show you that even in the life of dealing with events and circumstances that we deem to be traumatic, the body has a way of internalizing those traumatic events to build us and make us stronger. Is when society comes in to make us feel like we are weaker and we are victims to those events, that we embrace the title of victimhood and we embrace the identification of being weak. And so when we do that, we become weak victims. And when you become a weak victim, even if you don't identify yourself as such, you put yourself underneath that umbrella. And once you've put yourself in that category, you no longer have your superpower. You are weakened. And that's what the system wants. It wants you to be dependent upon medicine. It wants you to be dependent on psychotropic meds. I want you to take medicines so you can feel better. It wants to numb you out, because when you're numbed out, you can't deal with reality. And when you can't deal with reality, you can't grow. And then when you can't grow, you don't want to go anywhere. And when you can't go anywhere, your whole life is just diminished. Your brain atrophies. The ambition that you initially had atrophies. That childlike spirit that you had, that spunk and that enthusiasm for life is just dissipated. It's gone. It's gone because the world has robbed you of that, because they've caused you to think of yourself as a victim, and they've caused you to put yourself in a perpetual state of being deemed to be prey to some predator. The predator is the trauma. Guys, embrace trauma, folks. I'm not saying create it, but if it happens in your life and there's no way, it was not your fault, you were just born into it, it's okay. Look at the life of Jesus as a story. Though it's a mythical story and to me, but we can learn a lot from fables. Look at how he was born. He wasn't born in the best situation at all. His whole childhood was traumatic. Look what became of him. One would argue, say that a woman giving birth is traumatic. It is. The woman screaming, she's pushing. Our existence is fueled by the aura of trauma. In blood, we are born. Water breaks. An excretion of life. The woman's body being ripped apart. A changing of the body. Mutations occurring. Before life is embraced, pain is a prelude. Before you can embrace life and see life for what it is, traumatic events are the norm. So parents, don't overcoddle your kids. Talk to them, teach them. You be that resilient factor in their life. You be that resilient, consistent symbol in their lives. Stop trying to run from here and there to try to put them in best places and think that you're protecting them. You're teaching them how to be cowards. You're teaching them how to run from situations. If something's not killing them, stop trying to create a heaven on an earth that's full of hell. The only way to create a heaven is to go through the hell, because the hell helps you to have a better perspective on life thus giving you the heavenly mind state that you need, because heaven is a mindset. Heaven is not a place. You're going to be prepared for heaven by embracing hell. The reason why many religious people, they clamor and they gravitate toward the concept of heaven is because they think that, oh, this world is so crazy that I can't wait to go to a better place. It's the craziness that helps you to embrace the heaven. If earth was heaven-like, there would be no drive for anything better than what we already currently have. So people who are going through traumatic events, children, they're already building in those internal mechanisms to have drive and internal ambition to drive towards something greater. We don't need to stop them and take them through courses of how the trauma is shaping their lives. And every time they stumble or they hit a pitfall, I don't need you guys come in there to surround that person and say, oh, the reason why your life is like this is because of your trauma. It's because of the way you were raised. No, let that person continue to fail. Let them continue to hit the ground. Eventually, they'll get back up. And if they keep falling, they'll keep getting back up. Every time that person falls, resilience is being built. It's not, like they say, I know it sounds cliche, sounds corny, but it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. The getting up part is what's building resilience. And by the time you're through being knocked down, it comes to a point where you cannot be knocked down anymore. The body is so hardened that nothing knocks you down. Mentally, you can never be knocked down. So you can be knocked down physically. But when you're knocked down spiritually and mentally, that's even worse, because the physical part, we see that. But how are you internalizing the knockdown? Are you letting it overwhelm you to the point that it starts to seep into every crevice of your life? The way you treat your children, the way you treat your wife, the way you treat your husband, the way you treat your mother, the way you treat your father. I mean, how is your downfall impacting the other aspects of your life? That's the true nature of resilience. So stop trying to coddle your kids and protect them from everything, parents. I agree. I'm a parent myself. You protect them from dangers. We get it. But this idea that I need to put them in a perfect environment and give them all the things that I never had growing up, you're setting your kids up for failure. The reason why you are the way you are is because you had resilience that was built in. Trust the process. The human genetics evolves. Human life evolves. Human experience evolves and gets better. So stop trying to give your kids what you didn't have. Just be you. Be who you are. They're going to be better than you regardless. What you are doing by trying to give them what you didn't have is you are usurping, all right? You are usurping the sequence of universal law, and you're inputting and you're inserting yourself into something that has nothing to do with you. Once you had the child, leave the child be and just do the best you can. But doing the best you can does not mean trying to give the kid what you didn't have growing up. I hear parents say that all the time. Well, I didn't have this growing up. I want to make sure they have this. You don't need to make sure they have anything. Just raise them. As a matter of fact, raise them like you were raised almost. They're going to be better than you regardless. Because that gene of resilience is already in you. So that gene is metastasized and multiplied times 2. Your kid will be better than you. But when you start to make them too comfortable, you retard the progress of growth. You stop it from getting to where it needs to go. And you think you're doing yourself a service, but you're doing your child a disservice. See, it's self-serving for a parent to say, I'm doing this for my child. Yeah, that makes you feel better. It's the parent that throws a $5,000 1-year-old birthday party for their son or daughter. That's not for the son or daughter. That's for the parent. It's appeasing to the parents to spend all that damn money for their child. That 1-year-old baby's not going to remember what the fuck you did for them when they were 1 year old. That's for the parent. You have parents that parent like that. I want to make sure my child, this has nothing to do with your child. This has everything to do with you. It's your inadequacies, and you're pouring on your insecurities and your inadequacies on your child, therefore creating a weaker child. Be strong in who you are and let your natural essence be the guide to guide your child, guide you as a parent as you're raising your child. That's the true nature of seeing your children become better than you naturally, organically. Not trying to give them everything that you didn't have, because once you do that, you've killed the incentive to grow. People talk about generational curses. That is the generational curse. The generational curse is you trying to stop the process of evolution. As your genetic line is trying to improve and get better and evolve, you continue to put your foot down and interrupt the process, the natural process of growth. When a person plants, back when weather was normal, before we had this contamination with all this chemtrail nonsense, when somebody goes to A soil that's rich with microbiome, and the microflora is great and rich and is filled with a lot of nutrients, and you plant that seed in that soil. Nature takes its course. You don't need to do anything. The right environment will help the plant grow. Natural rain, natural sun. It doesn't need your help. Our children don't need our help. Let them experience life. You just be their guide and their focus, and you just teach them. But don't think that placing them in a certain environment is going to help them, or giving them materials, or giving them certain things, or giving them better clothes and better shoes, and giving them better fun experiences is going to make their lives better. That weakens them. Because you're taking away the one element that's supposed to make them strong, and that's the trauma piece. That's the struggle piece. That's the struggle piece. Thank you guys for listening. Leave a comment to me what you guys think. Peace. Remember, your health is your wealth. Until next time. Peace.